Welcome to The Pestle, reviewing and breaking down movies to look for insights into the movie-making process. Hosted by wealthy bad guys and poorly trained henchmen. I guess you're going for quantity, not quality. Let's dim the lights and start the show.
Welcome everybody to The Pestle. Today's show is brought to you by Al's Pancake World. Get the best sushi in town at Al's Pancake World. Welcome everyone to The Pestle. I am Wes.
And I am Todd.
And we're filmmakers. We make things occasionally, and we like to watch movies to review and understand how they got made, both as a learning tactic as well as just a fun conversation piece about what we know from the production process by our virtue of, making things ourselves. So I don't know. There's a lot going on today, and I want to dive right in. What are we covering, man?
Oh,
that was a man with two ends, by the way.
Nice. Today, we are turning back the clock a little bit and covering Michael Mann's Heat. So if you haven't seen this film, please pause the episode, go watch it. We're going to spoil all the things.
Yeah, we'll look at some of the stuff. Definitely dive into some of the cinematography. We'll talk about, dolly moves. We'll definitely want to talk about the sound, specifically around the shootout, the kind of realism that they're going for there and how they achieved it, as well as diving into some of the story and writing, talk about good guys and bad guys, the runtime, and other such stuff and things and stuff.
And a quick synopsis of the film. A group of high-end thieves feel the heat from the LAPD when they unknowingly leave a clue at their latest heist. Written and directed by Michael Mann, cinematography by Dante Spinotti, featuring Al Pacino as Detective Vincent Hanna, Robert De Niro as Neil McCauley, Tom Sizemore as Michael Cheritto, Val Kilmer as Chris, Ashley Judd as Charlene, Kevin Gage as Waingro, Diane Venora as Justine, Dennis Haysbert as Breedan, and
Haysbert.
Amy... What?
Haysbert.
Yeah, Dennis Haysbert as Breedan, and Amy Brenneman as Edie.
I do what I do best. I take scores. You do what you do best, trying to stop guys like me.
So you never wanted a regular type life?
The fuck is that? Barbecues and ball games?
Yeah.
This regular type life, that your life?
My life? No, my life. No, my life's a disaster zone. I got a stepdaughter so fucked up because her real father's this large type asshole. I got a wife. We're passing each other on the downslope of a marriage, my third. Because I spend all my time chasing guys like you around the block. That's my life.
Guy told me one time, don't let yourself get attached to anything you are not willing to walk out on in 30 seconds flat if you feel the heat around a corner. Now, if you're around me and you gotta move when I move, how do you expect to keep a marriage?
Well, that's an interesting point. What are you, a monk?
I have a woman.
What do you tell her?
I tell her I'm a salesman.
So then if you spot me coming around that corner, you're just gonna walk out on this woman? Not say goodbye?
That's the discipline.
That's pretty vacant, no?
Yeah, it is what it is. It's that or we both better go do something else, pal.
I don't know how to do anything else.
Neither do I.
I don't much want to either.
Neither do I.
All right, Todd, if it's between this and Godfather 2, for me, I'm taking this. As far as Pacino, De Niro combos.
Unbelievable. Unbelievable. I think I want to say that I saw a few months back, maybe more recently, a scene, they cast somebody else or something in this at first. and they shot this scene. And I think I saw that.
So originally, this was a pilot for a TV show that Michael Mann was creating. And so he went and shot a lot of scenes from this movie because he ended up, it didn't work or didn't get picked up. Whatever happened, I don't know. But he just recycled the idea and put it into a film that became Heat. And so, yeah, they had made, and so you get to see, there is a scene, this scene that is already shot, fully edited, all the works. And is it different?
Vastly.
The same dialogue.
Crazy. Same exact dialogue. And we should find it and put it in the show notes or something, because it is a perfect, it's easy to say Al Pacino and Robert De Niro, some of the best actors of all time. But that, when you have films like Taxi and Scarface and stuff, like you have major, incredibly well-written films and well-shot films by amazing directors. Oh yeah, they're great actors. It's easy to say that, but how do you put that into perspective? Putting both of these scenes, or this scene, side by side with what he shot, I guess, for this pilot or for this show, will absolutely show you how incredible these two guys are, especially when you put them across the table from each other. I mean, it's almost too much to see. You're just like, you're just blown away. I'm so glad you picked that scene.
And that scene happens almost exactly halfway into the movie. And it's such a thrilling moment because we never see that. Cops and Robbers is all about the cat and mouse game. The mouse can't let the cat see him. And if he does, he's got to run away. And the cat is doing everything he can to hide himself up until the moment it's time to pounce. And for Michael Mann to write into this film, you know what? He's going to pull him over. He's going to let him pull him over. There will be tension because we spent the last, hour and change of watching how both of these guys operate. And they're both hardcore. And then we're going to let him just sit down and have a cup of coffee in broad daylight and have a honest conversation. And halfway into that scene, he cues music. Like that is so subtle, but it just fades in as he's having this real moment with each other. He's like being vulnerable and really telling them, like, this is what's going on in my life. Well, here's what's going on in mine, And it's an incredible scene, man.
Dude, it's so good. I can't even. So yeah, I'd never seen this film before.
Wait, what?
Yeah, I'd never seen Heat.
This is your first time watching Heat?
Yes.
Holy shnikes.
Good catch. Yeah, I'd seen pieces of it, enough to know what it was about, kind of the general gist of it. But I didn't even know which one was the bad guy. Right. When I going into this film, and it was funny because going into it, I knew it was a cops and robbers film. And so I went into thinking, okay, I asked myself, who is going to be the bad guy and who's going to be the cop? And I guess right. I was like, I think Al Pacino would be perfect because he's played the bad guy in Scarface before, right? But I just thought, you know what? I think he'd be an excellent cop. I think he should be the cop, and De Niro should be the bad guy, because De Niro's, I don't know, he just plays such good bad guys. And I'm glad that I was right. I think that was fantastic casting. Obviously, I mean, geez, like Val Kilmer is incredible in this. It's great to see Ashley Judd, a young Ashley Judd, and a young Natalie Portman.
Yeah.
Danny Trejo. I mean, Tom Sizemore.
Lineup.
And then who is the black guy who just got out of prison and was trying to work?
Yeah, that's Dennis Haysbert.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I was like, oh my gosh. And he's young and, it's just so fantastic to see this. And then I also wanted to remind myself, okay, if there are any tropes that happen in this film, remember, this is 1995, right? This is, maybe there were some things that typically happened in cops and robbers films and everything. But for the most part, this is establishing a lot of those, or at least in that era where we start to establish there's a bad guy, they leave something behind, the cop finds it, he chases after them, and he catches them in the end, right? So just like let go of all of that and remember, like this, it's 1995. I mean, if there were tropes, which there were, they were called out, perfectly, and executed perfectly, so they didn't feel like a given. It didn't feel like, oh, I know it's going to happen. It happens. End of story. It was, I know it's going to happen. It eventually happens, but things happen in between that catch you off guard. So, like, for example, I did not know at the end or towards the end when they were traveling to the plane, I did not know he was going to decide to go kill the guy. To go to the hotel and kill Waingro. I thought he's got the girl. He's already told his buddy that he's gone. He's leaving. Val Kilmer's character has already left. Like, that's it. He's got the money. Just leave. And he hangs up with him, and I think, okay, cool, awesome. And this is just me. In hindsight, I should have known. Oh no, he's gonna go kill this guy. But this is just me playing devil's advocate as like a viewer, wanting more for this guy. I want him to be able to just be with this woman, but obviously it doesn't happen. And I love this scene because the scene calls out exactly what happens in the end. He sees Vincent running around the corner, and he leaves his woman without saying goodbye. It's exactly what he said he would do.
And if you count it in my head, I counted it, and it was exactly 30 seconds.
30
from
seconds.
The moment he sees her to the moment he turns away.
Yeah. It's just so good. And then if I could just call out a couple of things, and then I want to give you. Okay, so the cinematography is incredible. I mean, just remember this is 1995, and I think I just feel like a lot of this stuff hadn't been done before. They were everything was so methodical and thought out, even from the very beginning when we're introduced to all of these characters separately in their own separate situations. When we're introduced to Lieutenant Hanna, to Vincent, he's with his woman. They're in bed or whatever. But then we cut to the shot in the shower, which I was like, it just is a perfect example of how every shot is super meaningful, and any director going into a film needs to know exactly what they want and why. This shot is very simple. It's just a forward shot on the shower where Vincent's in, and we pan to the right, and we're not turning the camera. We're on a slider, and we're just sliding across the frame, and we see him. He's standing in the shower, just kind of like, I don't know, recovering or something, or just being, and then he's off camera. It's meaningless. It's not like it has anything to do with the whole film at all. But anytime anything is on the screen, it has to be for a purpose, right? And if the purpose is not to drive the narrative forward, the purpose should at least be of interest, right? Mm-hmm. It should at least be interesting. If it is not driving the narrative, because you're watching a 2-3 hour movie. It's 2 hours and 55 minutes or something insane. It's very long. You at least have to continually engage people, give them something interesting to look at if they're not getting a narrative push. And this is a great example of that. The scene beforehand, they're making out in bed. That's interesting, right? So then if we're going to stay with him, but we're going into the shower, but we're just going to show a static shot of him in the shower, that's boring. Why show that? No, cut that out. All you got to do, put it on a dolly and have him be the main focus of the shot, but then we go out. We leave him. We're we're dollying across and we're leaving him out of frame. Why? I don't know. Let's maybe see. Let's keep watching and see. Very intriguing. So the cinematography is fantastic. The color is amazing. It pops when it needs to. It's muted when it needs to. It's like yellow when it needs to be, but not all the time. A lot of like some films, they pick a color palette and they just stick with it, and that's it. And it's, a lot of sepia throughout the film, or a lot of blue throughout the film. This explores all of that. You have blues, you have yellows, you have reds. It's fun to watch in that regard. The acting, obviously, I'm not even going to speak to the acting because it's just otherworldly. Like, everyone brings it in this film. Everyone brings it. And I'm gonna tip my hat to Michael Mann for that. Obviously, the actors are fantastic. Val Kilmer is amazing in this film. Just reminds you that he's more than Top Gun. He's an incredible actor. Everybody's incredible in as actors. The score and the mix is incredible as well. So they do this thing, and you did it on your short film too, where you have a score, but the score is just a character in the movie. It is not the movie. So you have films like Interstellar where the score is, the acting is great and the movie is fantastic, but the score is the movie. It is so pivotal to the movie that if you took it away, it would be a completely different experience. This is not that. This is the score is mixed in lower than you would expect. It's very low in the mix, and to the point where you don't even know if music is happening sometimes because there's action all around, and the action is on top of the music completely. And then the action will die down, and then the music will kind of bloom, and it's just like these pads or these tinklies or whatever that is happening, but there's sound there. And it was there the whole time. You just couldn't hear it. I thought that was really interesting because now you're engrossed in the movie, but when there's kind of like a lull in action, there's still something happening. Unless there isn't, and that's also thoughtful as well, right? Where he's like, I want silence here, no music. But I almost wept at the end. Yes, because of what happens, because Vincent, kills McCauley, but the music at the end is some of the best film music I've ever heard. I don't know what that track is. My goal today is to figure out what that is, but that ending scene song,
it's Moby.
It's Moby.
God moving over the face of water. Like,
I'll
get into it later, but yeah, that's Moby.
I was absolutely floored, and I got hit. The hairs on my arms stood up, and I almost started crying. I started welling up. And the final shot of him holding his hand as he died at the end, and the wide angle of the runway lights, and they're just almost silhouetted. This is top 10 film for me. It is short of maybe thinking they could probably cut 20-30 minutes off of this movie because it's just very long. If I went through and I was like, and someone said cut 30 minutes off this movie or I'm going to blow your brains out, I could probably do it. And it would still be a great movie. But I get to live with these characters longer. So I'm one of those I'm okay with a very long movie as long as you give me characters that I want to spend the time with and a story that I want to see continually develop and turn into something that is bigger than it was 30 minutes ago. And this definitely does that. So I'm okay with that. So my only gripe would be that it's so long, but that's almost not even a gripe because Al Pacino, Robert De Niro, like, end of story. So yeah, fantastic. I'm so glad you know who that song was. I'm going to go listen to it all day now. It's so simple. It's just like 4 notes, basically 4 chords. And if I heard it maybe outside of, this is the other thing that I love about movies is that you can hear something that you would glaze over, but because you have this visual that's tied to a story that you care about, it takes an entirely different meaning. And that song is a perfect example of that. If I just heard that song out in the wild, I'd be like, yeah, it's cool. That's a cool song.
Yeah.
Oh, it's Moby? I love Moby. I've always loved Moby. I thought he's a, genius back in the 90s or the, early 2000s. But now seeing it in the context with these two guys of this in this film and the situation that they're in, it's just perfect. Yeah. Anyway, I'll pause there.
I'm so many feelings and thoughts. Like hearing this was your first viewing was just like, I'm so jealous. Like I wish I could watch this again for the first time, just a couple days ago. Like that's so cool. But for me, like, I watched this, not long after it came out. I definitely didn't see it in theaters, but as soon as it hit, VHS, I was a teenager and someone was like, yeah, you should check that out, man. It's got like a really cool shootout scene. I was like, okay. And
that shootout scene. God, oh my God.
We'll definitely be coming back to that. Easily the best shootout sequence of all time. Like I don't have a close second to it. It would be maybe like Wind River, which as a movie is okay, but that has a great shootout scene as well. And so watching this, I was just riveted, and it's almost 3 hours. And for me, it flies right by. Because of what you're saying, like there's always something going on, even if it's just kind of character building, and the drama between characters is always kind of moving the story forward and giving you something. And the cat and mouse game that's being played is always like, okay, now someone, Hannah's one step ahead. How is he going to react? And so there's this chess game that's happening, and you don't know what you don't know until it's already been revealed for that character, and it's like, I was just having coffee with him half an hour ago. Like, what do you mean you lost him? And it's so good because that happens in a cut. We go from them together to him walking into his office and no longer has track of him. But watching this, that same thing you're talking about with Moby. Like, I was completely riveted. I mean, and this movie for me, and I don't know if it's necessarily accurate, but for me, this was the first time I really heard, electronic music, not like synthy heavily, which again, it's fine. That's electronic as well, like a Blade Runner kind of score. Like for me, Blade Runner, by the time I got to it, already felt dated. Like it didn't feel fresh. It had its own thing going on and it's really cool. But it didn't feel current. Like Moby, like dropping tracks on this was just like it melted my face. This was a different ethereal quality that was being layered into a drama, a heist drama. Like I didn't really experience these feelings that the music gives you, overlaid on this kind of drama that doesn't feel like it should be there. It feels, anachronistic. It just feels like it's completely out of time. Experiencing that as a kid for me was just like kind of life-changing, because you get to the end of the film and that's what it feels like. You talk about welling up, and it felt for me like crying. That's what the music sounded like, is like the weeping of their professions and, the inability to kind of stop the train, which I think is reflected in the very first shot of the film. The title shot is a train on a track coming right at us.
Oh. I was wondering about that. Yes.
Right. And for the story, it still makes sense because it's, Neil, Robert De Niro's character, Neil, is getting on the train in order to go steal the ambulance. And so it plays, but you could shoot that in 1,000 different ways. You don't necessarily have to shoot that shot of train tracks and a train coming directly at us on the rail. But he did. And I feel like that's the implication, is what's going to happen is going to happen, and there's nothing anyone can do to change the track, the trajectory of this thing. And it's just, you get to that final moment, and God, it's so good. It's so emotional, and it just would not be the same with any other instrument. Like the fact that it's electronic, that it's man-made, is just completely appropriate. Even if, if it had been made 10 years earlier, it would have been something else, and it would have been fine. It would have been absolutely okay. It wouldn't have been magical though. And this is pure cinema magic, man. Oh my God. And it's so funny because I feel like, we wrote the same notes down, because I have a whole section on sound, obviously. But I have a specific section on the mix, and I just called it great mix. And we never talk about mixes. Like, how many, maybe one other time on the show we've talked about the mix. And probably none for me. Like, that was probably all you talking about the mix. But here, the mix is so good because you get to that last moment, right? And we hear whispers just as perfectly as any normal dialogue. And he's talking to him, right? He's like, I told you I'm never going back. And he's like, yeah. And that's it. That's their exchange. And then they hold hands. But even leading up to that, is dead silent in that little chase sequence. It's so heightened, and it's so cool how you can strip sound and make everything feel so much more important, so much more heightened by subtraction, and the lighting enhances that as well, that feeling, because the lights are so strong, right? The airplane lights come up as they're landing or taking off, and then the sound of the airplane overrides everything, and you go from dead quiet to overwhelming sound, and it just winds up and then dies away. And it's such a patient edit. The pacing there and that whole sequence is so patient. And we're just waiting to see who's going to, and gunshots ring out and they fire and back and then run away. And then we're just watching Neil as he waits. And it's so cool because we'll dolly over as Neil is watching and waiting around the corner with his gun. We dolly over and watch as what he's waiting for the heat to come around the corner. And then sometimes nothing happens. And then he continues running away. And so we never know when it's going to happen. When is this showdown going to finally happen? Until it happens again, one too many times, of course. And it's such a great shot because we dolly over and then we just kind of keep dollying and then we wait. And then he peeks around the corner. I don't remember if the camera takes over again. I'm going to scrub through. Yes. Oh, my God. So I'm scrubbing through that final little sequence. And no, we just punch in. We wait for, it feels like several heartbeats. The camera settles, and then he pops out around the corner. And then we punch in to close-ups to see what they're looking at. But it's just such a patient sequence. And I love that it ends with them holding hands. Like, that's such an unobvious way to end a film, is with these two hyper masculine machismo guys sending one off. It's beautiful, and it's symbolic, of their kind of simpatico relationship, because they kind of need each other in this perverse sense, right? You're not going to have, Detective Hanna unless there is, a Neil McCauley going and doing what he does. And yeah, I don't know, but that the music kind of carries you away, and it's just sweeping, and it's lived in half my playlists that I've made. Like, every once in a while I'll make a playlist for like the crew, and there's a good chance I end it with Moby.
Really?
With this song. Like, I like to throw this song on because it's lived, in my head ever since then. And I've been chasing, since I got into making films, I've been chasing that high that I got from watching this movie as a kid. Like, I've been chasing. I was like, if I could ever create that feeling. And so if you watch, a good chunk of my films, they end on some kind of musical note. Like, if you go back to where we ended, right? The last moment is a smash cut on one of your songs. The film we just wrapped is a smash cut on one of our songs. Like, I'm always trying to chase this exact high that I felt. And I haven't really given this yet, but I guarantee whenever I make my first or second film, like, it's going to have this kind of quality to it, because I am just on a mission of
what are the I mean, like, that has to show how good this actually is, that both of us separately, you when you were 15 watching this and me when I'm 45 have the same feeling on this track at the end. And it's not just that, it's a Moby track, but also their decision to make that the final track, right? Somebody has to decide. It's not just like Moby's like, here's your final track. Somebody has to decide, okay, yeah, no, this is the final track. This is the final moment, and then how to weave that in. and they weave it in flawlessly. It's so subtle and low and muted and just like particles of it while they're having their conversation at the end.
Yeah.
You know, it's there. It's just subtle. I think we talked about this before. Arcane does this really well with the track. If they're going to use a track leading up to the track happening, you hear elements of it coming in and weaving in here, weaving in there. There's a couple of chords that happen that are like, oh yeah. And then you end up hearing those chords in the track. And this is no different. This is a flawless execution. So it's just crazy that we have the same experience of this one song.
Where you just want to
live
in it. You want to inject it into your veins. It's just so freaking good.
That's a good way to put it. I've never actually, you know what? I've never actually like been able to put that into words before of when I hear a song that just, to sound trite, moves me, where I just want to put it on repeat and listen to it over and over again. That's a perfect way to put it. I want to just inject it into my veins. I want it to become a part of me. And it hurts that it's not. And so I just have to keep listening to it.
That's right.
You know, it's like I'm a junkie, trying
but that's
shoot up.
That's so perfectly said, because that's exactly how I feel. It hurts that it isn't. That it isn't part of me. Like, that's such a great phrase, man.
And I think I'm always searching for that.
Yeah.
I never expect to get it in a movie.
No. Yeah.
I expect to get it from an artist that I love and they put out a new record or something. And I'm like, oh, I want that. Because obviously it's music. Like that's what they do is music. Yeah. So I never really expect that in a film. So when that happens, i.e. Interstellar or i.e. Heat, it's just so unexpected. Which makes it even better.
Yeah.
I think.
And like to your point earlier, like the story gives it this extra layer of emotion and meaning that in a vacuum, it is a really good song. And I would probably hear it on the radio or something, or, at a coffee shop and be like, oh, this is cool. This is just like, it's like a rain stick. And I would just go on about punching away at my keys. But here it is so much more emotional. It feels like life and death. And it feels like, rain washing over you and trying to wash away everything that stings. And it's just full of so much kind of visual and emotional punch. It's just so good. I'm so glad we're talking about this song. Because I was definitely going to talk about it. I just didn't know that you were going to bring it up first.
Too bad. Yeah. Sorry to beat you to it.
No. So because this way we talk about it so much more than we would have.
Yeah, it's true.
Oh, and the rest of the mix is so good. Like that shootout, like I did some quick Googling because I was like, I'm pretty sure this is all diegetic, like actual production recorded sound, because that's kind of how he operates. Like Miami Vice, that's one of the cool things about the guns and some of those shootout sequences in there is he's using the actual on-set sound. And so I was just curious, double checking. I was like, I'm not overthinking this, right? Like this is, and so I found like a Reddit thread, and then as well as the sound designer who talks about it on a YouTube video, actually. And as a commenter, not even like his YouTube video, it was like a comment on someone else's. And it is like the gunshots were recorded on production.
What?
And what they did, this is according to Peter Michael Sullivan, the sound designer, says they used the scene production sound and that they augmented, and it's not clear if he's saying they augmented post or some mics. I think probably he's saying that the production mixer augmented, how they were recording it to give it extra punch, right? To give it probably more bass and width. So that it's just not like peaking the entire time. But he says that, they used it, and he does. And the reason I'm saying that is because he's crediting the production mixer as deserving a lion's share of the credit of how it sounds. That's, one aspect of it. Another aspect, and this is where I found, I think on a Reddit thread, of I think a guy who works in Armory that worked on other Michael Mann films. Not on this one, but he's saying he knows that they did the same thing for this one because he worked on his other projects. And he's saying that what they do is they use full loads of gunpowder in the blanks instead of what's normal is like a half or a quarter load. And so when you do that, it's basically just a gunshot without, a projectile point. And so you're getting the same full sound that you would get on a normal gunshot. And of course, that creates other aspects that you need to account for, sound, making sure not everyone goes deaf on set. And so there's probably earplugs or what have you. These are all things that are kind of spitballing on the Reddit thread, which makes sense to me. Like if you've never fired a gun before, you may not know how loud it can be. But anyway, that's, why the shootout sounds so good is because you're getting the full resonance of the gunshots as well as the atmosphere that they're being fired in. And so if there's a building over there, you're hearing the reverberations and, how that interplays with the environment pitched, absolutely perfectly. If enhanced a little bit in the mix, which is a lot of work. You got it. That's a lot. It would be fun to hear Sergio talk about, some of that stuff. But really cool. The one question that I had was watching some of the other moments, specifically at the end when you get to the hotel and Neil goes in and kills Waingro. Killing those gunshots to me sound more heightened than normal sound design. And so I'm wondering if they kept to that same attitude and methodology just because it just sounds bigger and fuller. And I'm curious if that's because they didn't do their normal, or if I've just never heard what a gunshot sounds like when it's fired inside of a room, because I have not. I've heard lots of gunshots out in the open. I've never heard a gunshot fired inside of a room. So I just may not have that, reference point. I mean, it sounds amazing and it sounds like brutal, which is also why I'm wondering if it was just a more emotional thing that they said, well, okay, we'll maybe do a more normal sound design of heightening this, or that's just what it sounds like. I don't know. But God, the sound design mixed so perfectly just gives this movie a completely grounded, realistic, elevated experience that you don't see, in a Michael Bay film, which I enjoy a Michael Bay film as much as the next person. But this feels like you're actually, and that shootout sequence is so good that they study it, that's used to demonstrate in like military and law enforcement. Like they watch this as an example of tactics and things to look out for, and like to kind of give people an experience of the way things operate. Now I'm sure there's still some liberties that are taken, because it's a movie after all. But at the same time, like, so many people, even bad guys, watch this. I think this inspired two guys in, was it LA, who get in full armor and actually robbed a bank and turned into a crazy shootout. That. Like, it was nuts. And so
I remember that.
Life imitating art is certainly a thing, unfortunately. But at the same time, the cool thing that Michael Mann does, and I feel like a lot of his films, is you get to the end of this film, bad guys pay the price. This isn't like glamorizing villains. It's kind of telling a very complete story of all these characters, right? There's good guys and there's bad guys. But the runtime, I feel like, gives so much space to humanize everyone, the cops and the robbers. And I think if you trim out an hour, I think in order to do that, lots of characters get shortened or cut entirely. I don't think you have Breedan, the cook, who is an interesting character. Like if you cut that guy out, you say one less thing about the system and about what people are experiencing in life. Because if that guy, that Dennis Haysbert, is playing this cook who gets out of jail and he's trying not to be a recidivist and go back into prison. He's trying to keep his nose clean. He's got this beautiful girlfriend or wife who's cheering for him, and she's proud of him. She's doing everything she can to keep this guy's head above water. If he had just been shown ounce of compassion and decency, he never signs on for that job at the end, because he was a completely throwaway add-on character. But we're following him to see what would drive a person to do this. And it's because, this manager in a restaurant sees a chump and he's like, I can take advantage of this guy and I can get a little kickback and I can have an easier workday by having someone do my job. Okay, he can sweep and he can mop and he can cook and he can take out the trash and he can give me a fourth of his pay on top of all that. And what's he going to do? All I got to do is violate him. I report him and he goes back inside. So I got him exactly where I want him. What options does he have? And it's like, you see this guy's back against the wall and being mistreated. He can't even take his breaks, right? That's the moment. It was just one thing too many. And suddenly, you know what? Yeah, I'll take it. Let's do it. I know how to drive a car, blah, blah, blah. And then you see him get shot and you feel horrible because you knew he had love in his life that he really couldn't enjoy because of all these other circumstances. He made a mistake in his past that I don't even think we know about. I don't know if they ever tell us what he did.
I don't remember hearing that. Yeah.
If they did, it's very brief, but almost unimportant to, these are just the circumstances that people find themselves in life. Let's see what happens next. And it's so good. And then you trim out an hour or, 30 minutes, you probably get less Charlene and Chris. They have a very interesting dynamic. And then you probably have no Lori, which is this whole other element of how men treat women in their lives, right? Her father is entirely absent for his own implied reasons of being, I don't know what, like either just a deadbeat or maybe he's some kind of bigwig. It seems like he's a bigwig who just doesn't think she's important enough in his life to show up for her at all, right? Well, they have a nice house, they have my money. That's all they need from me. And instead, what Lori, his daughter, needs is him, not all the things he's providing. And I feel like that's this whole other element that's kind of going through the lives of all these men doing what they do, good and bad, right? And it's interesting to see a reflection of how a good guy or a bad guy act in their personal life, how they treat their friends and loved ones, right? Pacino's character, Pacino is unhinged. Like, as an actor in this film, he is unhinged.
What is that?
He's got a great ass. I think about asses and I lose it. Shut up, Ralph. Sit down.
So good.
Like, he is losing it. And so much of this movie goes through my head every day. And a good 90% of it's Pacino yelling. But he's also not super concerned about his men, right? He's getting updates. He's on the phone, and one of his guys got hit earlier in the shootout, and he's back to work already. And he's asking, getting updates, and at the end, he tags on, "How you feeling?" He's like, "Banged up, but I'll live." Okay, hangs up. Yeah, on with my day. And De Niro, my God. De Niro looks the best he's ever looked in his entire life, younger or not. This dude is handsome and suave as hell. He's an attractive man, and I'm not, someone who really notices that kind of thing. But he's suited up, and Michael Mann seems to really like dudes in suits. That's kind of a thing for him. And I get it. It adds a whole other vibe. This movie, shot in 95, doesn't feel completely like a 1995 movie. I mean, outside of a couple cars, like a couple cop cars that look like they're from, 85, just old LA beaters, LAPD beaters. This feels like it could have been made, 10, 15 years ago. It doesn't feel 30 years old when you factor in so much of the production design, the lighting, the music. It's amazing. And so, but this guy, De Niro's character, Neil McCauley, he's not that bad of a guy in the sense of he didn't want to kill those cops at the beginning during the heist. He ends up killing the last one because, as Vincent says, why not? Why leave a witness after all this? But the other interesting thing to him is he gives Cheritto, once they find out like they're being looked at by the cops and they're all making a decision, and Cheritto's like, played by Tom Sizemore, Cheritto is like, whatever, it's whatever. If you want to do it, yeah, it's whatever. And he's like, no. Not this time, Cheritto. Like, you got to make a decision. He's like, well, what do you, and he takes a beat, walks up to him. And he's like, well, what do you think? Is this the best thing? Cheritto doesn't know how to think for himself. And he tells him point blank, don't take the job. You got money here and there. You got it all over the place. I don't have what you have. And you got a family. Like, just walk away. This isn't your job. Cheritto does it anyway. He's like, all right. Like, it didn't help Neil to tell, he needed that guy. And maybe you could make an argument that he's manipulating him, but I don't think so. I think he's giving him genuine advice. Like, he gives him the layout, like, you don't actually need this, just walk away. He's looking out for his guy, unlike, it feels like Vincent is. Vincent is just like getting whatever he needs. He's using people left and right, pressuring people to get the job done. And it's just a very interesting inversion of looking at a good guy that you kind of hate, looking at a bad guy that you kind of like. And that's a fun push and pull. I mean, it's an obvious contrast to take, but not as obvious as let's make the bad guy really bad. Like, that's boring, and it's like, why am I watching this at all? This is, of course, I want the cop to win, but feeling conflicted at the end of this movie when you watch, like you said, this guy is ready. He's there. He's on his way to the airport. He's done. Don't do it. You're rooting for him to just walk away. And he can't. He just can't. It's so good. It's a really good dynamic. Yeah. And I love, Cheritto just finishing his story. The shootout goes wrong. He's trying to escape. And they all split up. And he's running through the pavilion. And he jumps into the little water fountain. And he slips and falls. And I love that little moment because it's indicating something. It's telling us that he's lost his edge. He's out of control. He's about to die. Like, this guy isn't sharp anymore. He's been sharp in the past. We've seen him on his game. This isn't that, because it's the very next moment, right? He picks up the little girl, and now you're really rooting against him. You want this guy to die now, because who does that? What jerk is so selfish that and so they're giving you so much like momentum to let this guy die on screen and for you to be okay with it. We've seen him take out cops and all this. So it's a really beautiful setup to the payoff. And that shot, man, I love this shot. I think about this shot all the time of Pacino, Vince, just the technique that he has whenever he sees this guy and he's not looking at him. He lines him up and then he lines him up again. He like kind of relaxes into it and gets a firmer shoulder pull, right? And it's such a great little 2-second thing of watching him relax a little bit and loosen up to get a better shot, and patience of waiting for this guy to come right into his, sight lines. It's great. This whole movie.
It's unbelievable. That's another one of the best moments of the film for me. I'm so glad you called that out, because we've seen it 100 times before of someone lining up a shot to, like a cop lining up a shot to take out somebody. He can't miss. If he misses, he might kill this little girl or whatever. But the way that they executed everything that came before it, I mean, it's the longest shootout ever. It just doesn't end. And the way that they set it up, and that behind the scenes, obviously Al Pacino's not aiming at a person, right? So the direction to give him, and then his ability to convince me that he is aiming at a person who is holding a child, right? In context, right? When you're cutting back and forth, us as a viewer, obviously, yes, he's aiming at this bad guy and he's going to shoot at him or whatever. But in reality, Pacino maybe wasn't aiming at somebody specific or whatever. So he has like half a second to convince me what he's doing. And of course, I'm just so involved in it. I know exactly what he's doing. Even if they don't cut back to the guy with the kid, I know exactly what he's doing. Because like you said, he takes a beat, he aims, he takes another beat, he aims again, and then doesn't hesitate. That's the other thing. His hesitation isn't indecision. And that, I think that's probably the biggest part of that, is that it's not indecision. It's actual decision. He's already decided, I'm going to do this. It's just making sure I do it right. Taking that extra moment to make sure that I don't miss, because I am going to shoot this guy and kill him. You know what I mean? Like, there's a difference between like apprehension and indecision, or, and he just executes that flawlessly. And the music, the sound design leading up to that is just otherworldly. It's like, it sells it, Yeah.
Totally sells it. Cinematography wise, there's so much, there's so much coverage. It's so well thought out. It would take me like a week to really go through the shootout sequence and understand how he did it, just because it's so perfect. You always understand what's happening. And it's not just, we're going to hold up, shoot for 30 seconds. And then we'll cut to, it's very fluid. And you can see characters reacting and responding to each other in real time, and it feels very real time. And that's so much more specific of, here's what's going to happen. Here's how we're going to capture it. Here's when this guy goes down. Here's how that affects the rest of the shootout. It's not just people firing guns off. It's just so masterful. But there's some really cool dolly tracking shots that I like early on. They do a nice job of tracking and crossing in front of a car. And so these have to be Steadicam shots, because early on, there's a scene where Chris and Charlene, Val Kilmer and Ashley Judd, who I keep thinking is Charlize Theron. It is not. But they get into an argument, right? They have this big fight. They're supposed to go out on the town that night and celebrate and have a good night. And they end up fighting and throwing things. And Chris storms off and flies off in his car. And we track the car as it's pulling out and flying, by us, and we track it all the way until we move in front of it to allow it to wipe the screen, and then ultimately reveal the house after it, clears the frame. And it's really beautiful. And Steadicam, it has to be, or a crane, I guess it could be a crane. But it's a big fat crane, which Michael Mann probably has big fat crane money, to be fair. And so, but regardless, there's a lot of ways you can do it. You can do this in an office building, tracking people. The same idea is there. It's like, okay, we want to get to this shot over here. How can we make it more interesting? Well, start here, and then track a person and walk in front of this person as they're crossing the camera. And then as they clear the frame, you then are left with whatever you're trying to look at. In this case, it was the house. And so it's such a dynamic, interesting move. And they have so many really fun, interesting, dynamic camera moves throughout. Like even that last section with Chris and Charlene is very interesting, because it starts on a close-up of Charlene, and she walks out onto the balcony, and then we slowly pan over and crane over as well to see the cops waiting, and then we keep moving, and the crane picks up a car coming down the street that we realize is Chris's Camaro, and then we crane all the way down, and it's such a beautiful shot because everyone nails it, because it ends up perfectly framing the basketball game happening in the background, and then Chris is able to get out of his car directly into the center of the frame. Like the car stops on a dime, which is Val Kilmer. He's driving that thing. He stops on a dime, and the cam op is perfectly framed. It's a beautiful shot, and it's wide. It's such a wide shot. It's easy to mess up the height on that thing. And it's just, gorgeous camera work, worth studying, along with a dozen other things. I agree. Top 10. I'm kicking myself that I didn't have it in my top 10 when we did that previously. And so now it's swapping out one of the films on there. Anyway,
there's so many good films. It's hard to,
it's
hard to pick, man. I don't blame you.
There is some interesting stuff with the lighting. for the most part, it feels very motivated by the surroundings. Like you go towards the end, he gets off the phone and they're driving, and they go through the tunnel and it starts to kind of wash everything out because of the lighting in the tunnel. Like that wouldn't surprise me if he went through and changed all the bulbs or installed a bunch, 200 LED Kino flows or something in there. I don't know. Or maybe that's just the way those lights look. Coin toss. That could go either way. Like that's not unheard of for a DP to go and swap out, 200, 300, 500 bulbs. That's just the game. That's why you have a lot of people in your electrical department. Yeah. And so anyway, some of the lighting though feels unmotivated. Like there's some moments where I'm like, the light just kind of seems to exist here. That chase sequence where Neil is chasing Edie up the hill and they kind of get to the top, and I'm like, I don't know that there's a lamppost up here. I don't feel like I saw it, but regardless, it does kind of create this ethereal quality that works, first of all, because it's beautiful. And two, especially in 95, we weren't thinking about lighting. Like no average viewer was thinking about how things are lit. Now everyone's a cinematographer, of course. And it's funny watching some people who don't work in the industry talk about, cinematography, because you're just like, I don't think that's how that works, my friend, but cool. But there's some points when I think some of the lighting kind of creates this green screen effect. Even though it's probably on location, some of the shots look like it's green screen. Yeah,
you're right. I thought that too.
Yeah, and it's so funny because, like, to me, the main one that I'm thinking about is the patio scene between Neil and Edie after they meet. And I don't think it's necessarily unintentional because when you start talking about, like, this unmotivated light creating this false sense of lighting, I think it's, like, very much indicative of their relationship. They have a relationship based on lies. It's false. Like he's creating a false environment that she's inhabiting. So I don't think it's, unmotivated story-wise. I think just within the world itself, it doesn't seem completely motivated. So like when they're on the patio, I think he's leaning over and she's leaning over the railing. And it's interesting to look at how they're lighting that because I think they're supposed to be using the city to motivate some of this kind of 3-point traditional lighting. And it's I think it's too strong, kind of the ambient light that's coming from the quote unquote city, because it's just way too strong of a kicker. And I think that's what happens whenever I've had this happen on my sets where I bring in someone to DP and they're lighting it so strongly with this 3-point effect that they don't feel the actors don't feel a part of the background anymore. It feels like two completely separate things. And so I've seen this happen where it looks like a green screen effect when I'm looking at it with my eyes and I'm like, no, they're sitting in this library right now. It's just a way that was lit. And so anyway, it's interesting that you can use it in different ways to create a different kind of feeling based on their relationship. Anyway, the rest of the film feels fairly high contrast, but maybe naturally high contrast. So you get to the end of the film and like highlights getting blown out left and right because the plane lighting, but then the shadows are also crushed when all that light goes away. And it's really throughout the film pretty well done, like pushing the contrast to the edge because it's playing in the same territory of the story, playing with good guys and bad guys, law and crime, and good and evil, all those kind of elements pushed to their extremes. Yeah. I mean, look, it's a 3-hour film. There's plenty to dive in and pick apart, but I think the runtime works really well for me. Every moment, the pacing, you're filling it up with emotion, with character, and really painting a portrait of all the people that inhabit these kind of stories and not giving them short shrift. Normally, I feel like you might get to know the bad guy a little bit, if only just to see how bad they are, a la Michael Bay films. And then you spend the rest of your time with the good guy and finding reasons to like them and root for them and seeing how they crack the case. And this is one of the very few times whenever you really just seeing humans, and it's humanizing everyone on each side of the line, and that just takes time. You know, it just takes a lot of time, and it's well utilized. I'd be interested to see what was deleted, because they had to have shot another 20, 30 minutes of content that just didn't make it in. Right?
Oh yeah, 100%.
Oh.
100%. Yeah, like what takes did De Niro and Pacino give? That didn't make the cutting room floor. Like, that would be fantastic to see.
Cool.
Them just riffing, because that there had to be moments where they just like, I think Michael Mann is pretty, like rigid with his scripts probably, but when you get someone like Pacino and De Niro, you just kind of like, you've got to let them do their thing, right? Yeah.
Oh, so good.
Man.
I do for you. You don't do for me.
You don't do for me. So good.
I've watched this movie
So
an
good,
absurd number of times. For a 3-hour film, I've spent probably too much of my life watching this thing. Oh,
that's okay. That's okay. As long as you learn something from it.
I did,
right?
I think. Dope. Yeah. Final thoughts, man?
Again, top 10 movie for me. Unbelievable. I just really adore the acting, the cinematography, the directing. I can see the directing when I want to, and I can make it disappear when I don't. The music, the sound mix, the vision for this film is just fantastic. It was a wonderful experience. God. I'm sorry that it took me 45 years to watch it. Or not 45,
30,
I guess.
Technically, yeah.
30, yes. Yeah.
Oh, so good. Nice. What are you gonna recommend this week?
So I was gonna recommend another Michael Mann film, but I'm just gonna recommend something else. It's not a film; it's an action, and it's. I was debating on whether or not to do this or not, and whatever. I don't know how you put this in show notes or something. I'm gonna recommend canceling Netflix and canceling Spotify. And what I have reasons behind that, and I'm there are options, I guess. So this is, and I'll give you these options, and we can put them in the show notes, whatever. There are options where you can see a lot of the same movies that are on Netflix on free services. There are ways to, and some of them have ads, some of them don't have ads, but we are moving into this era of constant monthly charges for things. And then when a service has an exorbitant number of people who are coming in and paying per month, they just start gouging you. I mean, I remember when Netflix was $8 a month or $12 a month, and now they just raised their rates again, and it's ludicrous. It's absolutely insane. And anybody can give me any kind of argument, and that's fine. And of course, they are a company and they have every right to do that, and that's fine. I have every right to find another service that gives me what I am looking for at, a fraction or no cost. And they don't pay enough to the artists. And the same thing goes with Spotify. Spotify is the worst out of any kind of subscription service that you could think of. Spotify is the absolute worst. They pay almost, I want to say it's less than $3 for 1,000 streams. It's ridiculous. Maybe actually it might be less. It might be like 30 cents for 1,000 streams. It's ludicrous. And the quality of the audio is shit. It's terrible. If you go and you subscribe to YouTube Music, it's almost lossless. Meaning that if I am an artist and I put out a record and you want to hear all of the painstaking detail that I put into it, and you go listen to Spotify, you are hearing 1/6 of what it is. It is terrible. Wow. I mean, they cut almost all of the fidelity out of the music. And so anyway, but there are other services that are better. Apple Music is better and it pays better. YouTube Music is better and it pays better. YouTube Music honestly is probably one of the best. So That's my recommendation, is look into other alternatives. How about I'll say that? Other alternatives to Netflix, other alternatives to Spotify, because not only are they kill the artist, they really do. And I love the accessibility that Netflix brings to film, but that comes with a cost. That cost a lot of times is either quality, or just ease of access too. When things are easy to access and there's no barrier to access, then the value that those things bring to you is less. So what do? You consume more. When you used to have to go to a record store and listen, like I'm going there to get the new Metallica album or something, and you would listen in the store, it is a different experience than just going onto a streaming service and just gorging yourself with content. And I feel like most streaming services are the same way. And so people are digesting them in a different way. And then to gouge you with pricing is just the worst. And Spotify is no better. So I'll get off my soapbox, but that's what I'm recommending.
Copy that.
Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah.
I am going to stick with media.
Cool. Go for it.
Like I love what you're saying. Like there's definitely got to be a point where Netflix rethinks. I can't speak to Spotify. I've been on Apple Music for a while. Not that they're probably wildly better than Spotify, but I sound wise, I wouldn't be able to tell anyway. But Netflix, that I'm obviously more familiar with, and it was my frustration from kind of the jump. Once I saw like House of Cards getting picked up, that was my first thought of how, because I come from the screenwriter mentality background, like how, and I understood residuals and how all that operated. So once Netflix started this new model of production, I was really confused as to what that back end could possibly look like. And I was worried about residuals and how that all operated. And that's something that maybe will get better in terms of they're bringing ads back to, streaming, and it's maybe going to look a lot like the old way, which is frustrating as a viewer, but also like, okay, maybe things will get, a little bit more closer to the way things used to operate in terms of you could make a living doing what you loved. And instead of feeling, oh, I got paid and for 6 weeks of work and now I'm back to looking for a job and I'm driving Uber or whatever. Like it's really crazy to think of a project you worked on that made someone, hundreds of millions of dollars, that you're done. Like you get no, knock on compensation for the work that you did on that. Which is what you might be signing up for now, but for a lot of people, that's not what they signed up for when they began this career path. And that's a bit of a left turn that used to be train tracks, and now it's suddenly car tracks. Like the train has left the station or is still at the station. I don't know, but yeah. So there's a problem that needs to be rectified, and them continually charging more and more is like they're pushing the boundary here a bit, but that can take a big long sidetrack that when you start talking about money and the economy, I can really, get wound up with all of that kind of inflation discussion.
Yes, I know. Sorry, didn't mean to open the Pandora's box.
All good. But anyway, I was on the fence because I watched Nickel Boys yesterday, and that's such a crazy great film. But I think I'm gonna go a little bit further back. There's a French film called The Trial of Joan of Arc. Came out in 1962. I think it's still streaming on HBO. If not, it's probably streaming somewhere. And because it's not that long, it's 45 minutes, an hour or something like that. It's so good because it's about obviously Joan of Arc and her being burned at the stake. And it's ripped directly from the pages of those trials. Like they kept trial documents, and the script is mostly lifted directly from the actual trial itself. And so you're kind of watching a reenactment of things that were said. And I'm sure there's moments where they're fleshing it out here and there, but by and large, it's you're hearing what was said back in whatever that is, 1600s or the 1300s or whatever. It's, man. And that alone is worth watching to see how people with authority treat, people that isn't serving their purposes, isn't serving their goals. And I don't know, I think that came to mind just because I'm watching a film about law enforcement, and someone who is going to do whatever it takes. And it's interesting to watch these negotiations. Vince is talking to, I'm forgetting his name, but the guy in the junkyard, and he's leaning on him. And then he goes and meets Tone Loc, and he's like, Tone Loc is, okay, I'll give you something, but what are you going to do for me? You need to go take out my competition. And he's couching it as a good citizen, but, Vince calls him out immediately. He's like, I know what you're doing. You're trying to help yourself by reporting some other guy. This is what's called snitching. That's what actual snitching is. People often talk about snitching as you just telling. That's not what snitching is. Snitching is whenever you're ratting out your competition in order to give yourself a benefit. Like, I'm gonna take this dealer out on this corner so that I can take over that corner, and not because I care about my neighborhood. And so that's all this guy is doing, and Vincent's letting him. He's playing along, and it should make you question law enforcement tactics and how we do what we do as a society. It's fascinating. But all those thoughts led me to think about the trial of Joan of Arc. And so I'm going to recommend that. Go check it out. It's fascinating as much as it is beautiful and as much as it is heartbreaking, for sure. Yeah.
Amazing.
Stay tuned for next week. We're going to take a look at Limitless. That was a recommendation last week. So we are wasting no time.
We don't beat around the bush here. On the Pestle.
Check that out. We'll get a little bit more Bobby De Niro in our lives. Yeah. And don't forget, subscribe, drop us a review if there's something you want us to cover or talk about. You can do that. And if you want to comment on this episode, you can do that at thepestlepodcast.com/heat.
Great quote. Our quote of the day is from Wyatt Earp. You must learn to be slow in a hurry. That's the perfect definition of Pacino right before he takes that shot. He was slow in a hurry. And it's really hard to describe, right? How do you describe being slow in a hurry? I think it's decisiveness in the moment. I don't know. How would you describe that?
One of my favorite sayings that I picked up from watching like CrossFit videos is slow is smooth, smooth is fast. Like sometimes trying to hurry, you end up wasting everything. You screw it all up, right? Haste makes waste and all that kind of thing. And the best technique that I've heard in my head that I use a lot is slow is smooth, smooth is fast. Like do it with intention, figure it out, and it'll be so much better. The result will be exactly what you want instead of wasting actions and wasting movement. Right?
Unbelievably good saying for life in general.
Right. That's the other thing I like about his quote. You must learn to be slow in a hurry. Filmmaking is that. You only have so much time to get your shot. And going in, knowing what you want is one thing, and you show up prepared. But then whenever you're actually doing it, you're going to have people coming at you, throwing ideas, and they're going to be sometimes good ideas. And you can tell everyone to shut up sometimes, and sometimes that's what you got to do. But then sometimes it's so much faster to be like, let's do it. You have an idea, we're going to take 2 minutes and get your shot. Cool. Now we're going to get my shot. Cool. Now we're going to move on. Instead of wasting 5 minutes arguing about it and learning those distinctions of how to be intentional. Be slow in a hurry. That's filmmaking in a nutshell. It's just being so intentional and methodic and practiced, you know? Yeah, I don't know. I love that. I saw that quote. I was like, what's a really fun law enforcement person? Wyatt Earp. Who's more legendary than Wyatt Earp? Okay, let's do that.
What is it? What is the saying? Slow is Smooth
Yeah,
is
slow is
fast.
smooth is fast.
I love that. You'll be the quote of the day next week.
Or whoever said that. It definitely wasn't me.
Quote of the
but,
day is from Wes Heidenreich.
Well, quoting Wayne Gretzky.
There you go.
Quoting Michael Scott.
Awesome. Well, this is fantastic. I'm so glad we finally got to do this film, to talk about this film. Just wonderful. I'm going to go listen to Moby now. Hopefully you guys enjoyed this. Make sure to review us, subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. It all helps, and share us with your friends if you like what we're doing. It all helps a lot. We really appreciate it. Until next time, I'm Todd.
I'm Wes.
Go watch the movies.